Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Higher Moment Mastermind. Happy Friday. I am Shira Lotzar, your host, joined by Vern Schellinger. We are delighted to be here to answer your job search questions. So we will no longer, unfortunately, have Tenny Good with us, who is from Federal Job Results, or the team there. Their schedules have gotten pretty full. So we won't have our federal job search expert from that group, but Chris Westbrook hopefully will join us today or maybe in future weeks, and she's got some federal expertise as well. So for those who are looking for that angle, anybody who has questions that we can't answer, I'm happy to refer you over to Tenny and Corliss and those folks. So just FYI. We're going to definitely have more of a private sector conversation. So with that, wanted to just sort of open things up and see who has any job search questions that we can answer, and we'll kick things off. So who'd like to start us off?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
And this is, obviously I'm more senior. I've worked for many, many years, but I was wondering about the advisability of applying to jobs that are more mid-level. Someone will just dismiss that out of hand, or if that's an opportunity to at least say that you're looking.
Yeah, it's a great question, Susan. It kind of, first of all, depends on what you mean by mid-level. Okay, people think of that as in different ways. For a person who's coming from, let's say a vice president level, applying to a director level job is certainly feasible, or can be. I mean, the employer might raise an eyebrow like, why? But it's not like we're applying to a manager. Okay. That's typically a bit of a step back for most employers' tolerance level, only because they are looking for somebody who's going to be challenged in the job, who wants this role, who's not going to, this is a stopgap job. So, what I always like to say is you always have to walk a mile in the employer's shoes, always. Okay. They're making the hire. Now, look, you're the other side of the equation. So the role has to be right for you. But when you're talking about appealing to an employer, you have to think of the things the whole way. What's going to attract them? What's going to appeal to them? Under what conditions would they want to or not want to hire somebody like me? Qualifications, level of experience, tenure, industry experience, compensation level, right? Geography, like all of those things. We've said it a million times on Higher Moment Mastermind, and that is employers are risk averse, right? Risk averse. Okay. And they're looking for the unicorn candidate. And so anytime you apply to a job, you've got to put their hat on. If they were looking at my resume, would they like what they see? If they heard about me, would they like what they're hearing, right? And then to the extent that you can minimize their risk, great. So it's not to say that you shouldn't or couldn't apply. You can for a lower level job, but understand that that's one of those potential flags where they'd be like, is this person going to stick around? Is this person going to want this role for any length of time? Does that help?
Yes, it does actually.
Yeah. Vern, is there anything you want to share?
I would just say that is one of the, strong biases of hiring managers, and having been in HR and worked, and recruited lots of people in lots of different organizations. They always think the overqualified person is just here to take this job, and then 6 months later, they'll be gone.
Right.
And so to Shira's point, risk averse. Oh my God, I really like her. She'd be great. She could add a lot of value. But if she leaves in 6 months, we've invested this time, and now we got to start the search all over. All of those things are playing in their heads, and so it's a tough challenge. Though the one other thing that I will add is I was hired once, and I was clearly overqualified for the job, but it just happened to be a particular manager who had an all-female staff. Actually had a preference for a male. And, I had an informational interview with her. I didn't even know she was hiring. But at the end of the informational interview, she told me she had an opening and would I be interested. So it's somebody who believes in you, strongly enough to get over that. I know he's overqualified, but I really do want a male on my staff, and he really looks like he could add some value. Whatever was going on in her mind, she took that chance, and it worked out great. So it can happen, but like Shira said, it's a real challenge.
Got
So,
it.
and for all of you on the phone thinking I'm so hip with these blue lights, by the way, I'm in my grandson's bedroom in Boston, Massachusetts, and I can't figure out how to turn them off. So,
He is
It's
looking
probably
at
via his phone.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
All right. So hopefully that helps, Susan. All right, other questions?
Well, I sort of have a loaded question. I understand the difference between a career coach and a quote, a recruiter that you pay. What would be the criteria for selecting each one, and how do you know they're going to get value? And I'm not sure how they work. If they work on
Okay,
contract
yes,
or
we have to,
hourly.
we have to flip that completely around. So here
Okay.
it is. Ready? Here's the one statement.
Okay.
Recruiters work for the employer. They don't work for the candidate. You don't hire a recruiter. The employer hires the recruiter.
Okay.
It's really, really like the most basic thing I can possibly tell you. So you're not selecting a recruiter to work with. It's kind of a myth in the market. People say, oh, go hire a recruiter. No, you don't hire a recruiter. The employer does. So you think of it as, if you are applying for a job and there happens to be a recruiter, that's the person who vets you, who screens you, who liaises between you and the employer, maybe preps you for the interviews, that kind of thing, but you don't hire them. Okay. Now I can walk you through, I think, were you here last week? Because I think last week I did a whole, did last week. I can't actually, I've been on several job seeker calls in the last week. So I can't remember where I said what. Last week, do you guys remember me talking about the difference between different kinds of recruiters?
That was in your career competence.
Oh, okay. So thank you, Eric. Eric's been traveling around with me all week. Okay, so if it's okay, I'll go ahead and share a little bit about the distinction between each one. If that's Ty, would you like to do that?
Yeah, and
Okay.
I was referring to, just go ahead. I'll just let you speak. Go ahead.
Yeah. So
I thought it was good. It was like you filled in the missing puzzle piece for recruiters for me.
good. I'm glad. I guess Cicely, you were there too. Yeah. Okay. So for those who weren't there, I'll do it pretty quickly. And for those, of course, who are going to watch this video. So you've got two kinds of recruiters. You've got a corporate recruiter, and then you've got a third-party recruiter. Okay. So a corporate recruiter is somebody who is hired by the company. They're a full-time salaried employee. They are usually part of the human resources department. Vern, I don't know if you ever had a corporate recruiter or ever large enough to have one, right? But it's typically organizations who have usually over 200 employees at least, that would where there would be enough job openings where they could justify having somebody full-time in-house. So they're a regular staff person, okay? Then there are third-party recruiters. Now, no one would ever call themselves a third-party recruiter. That's just kind of the concept. Third-party recruiter could be called a headhunter, permanent placement person, sometimes a staffing agency. And all of those third-party recruiters are hired by employers. They've got clients. They are a business, okay? I am a third-party recruiter. So I have multiple clients who I would work with. And the employer would call one of us. Why? Because usually they are small enough, usually, not always, but usually they're too small to have a full-time recruiter. And their HR person's saddled with other things. And maybe they have a one-off search and they go, you know what? We can't handle this. We don't have the capacity for it. We don't have the time. We don't have the expertise. So they might call somebody like me and say, hey, Shira, can you do the search? We charge them a fee, okay, for that search. Now, in the third party worlds, okay, you've got even a couple different kinds in there. So in the permanent placement, not the temporary staffing, we're not talking about that, but in permanent placement where people are placing you in a permanent job, you've got usually two kinds of recruiters, contingent and retained. Okay, so I happen to be a retained recruiter, retained search consultant, as some people call it. Which means that when I'm working with an employer, number one, the job, it's exclusive. It's an exclusive search. There's no other recruiters working on it. Number one. And number two, the employer pays me a fee as we go along. Okay. So we're investing. We both have skin in the game. I'm working for them, but they're paying me a fee as we go along. The reason why that's important to know is because retained recruiters tend to be much more invested in the search. Usually it's more senior level roles, frankly. Where an employer would be willing to pay, as they go along. the employer, excuse me, the recruiter often has more information about the role. They talk to stakeholders. They usually like really get it. Like they're invested in the search. The other is the contingent recruiter, and contingent recruiters don't get paid until they make the placement. Okay, so they're working for free until they make the placement, and that means a couple things. Number one, the searches are typically, not always, typically not exclusive. Typically with contingent recruiters, there are other search firms, other recruiters that are working on the search, which means there's a lot of competition, and it's kind of the, first to market, or the first person who makes the placement wins, which also means that that recruiter is typically working very quickly. Often there's not a lot of time for them to spend with the employer. The employer often doesn't even want to spend a lot of time with them, because the employer is working with multiple firms and they don't want to spend hours with all these different firms. And so they often will sort of do more of a cursory job and say, well, here's the job description. Here's a few little data points, go find somebody. I mean, it's a model. People do it. But what happens on the flip side is, as a candidate, you may not get as much information about the role. The relationship with the recruiter might feel a little more transactional. You may not get as much prepping from the recruiter. It might feel a little bit like the recruiter's all over the place. It's not their fault. It's just the business model, And so again, they're working on volume opportunities a lot, because they're not getting paid until they make the placement. So they have to have lots of different searches. So I hope that's helpful, Ty.
Yes, it is. I guess the other part of the question is, and maybe this is something that I have a discussion offline with somebody, is when you choose a career coach, what should you be looking for?
That's different. Yeah, career coach is a very different thing. I mean, I can speak to that because I'm also a career coach. So I can tell you a little bit about what that looks like. There are all kinds of career coaches, of course. Some have industry specialties, some do not. Some are much more focused on your career. And Vern as well. I want Vern to talk to you. Please make sure that you do that. We're all different. Yeah. Lots of coaches. So you should talk to multiple if you want to work with somebody. But some are much more focused on kind of what I call career exploration. Right? If you don't know what you want to do next, there are some people that take you through tests and exercises, and that's mainly their focus. There are some that are very much about the job search process. I know that Vern is a master networker. He's got a whole networking, kind of approach and philosophy. He does other things too, right? But everybody's got their specialty. Somebody like me, I do, bits of what I just shared, but I'm a career brander. So actually I write resumes and I write LinkedIn profiles, and so I'm a copywriter, right? That kind of person. And I also am a recruiter. So I bring a hiring, recruiter lens to it, but lots of different types, right? You want to make sure that you find somebody who's right for you, fits your personality, fits what you're looking for, what kind of, support, that you need for your search. So Vern, did you want to share anything else about what you do or what others do?
Yeah, I think I mean, from a career coach standpoint, what I'd suggest to you, if you're looking for a career coach, is to write down, what's important to you in the job search. What are your questions about how a career coach works? And then, reach out and interview 2 or 3 career coaches.
Right.
And there is a part of that whole process where it's also kind of chemistry. Who do you all of it have some connection to, or some feel best about. But I don't want to minimize getting answers to those questions and your concerns, and who answers those best, and in their answers, what are they telling you that says, wow, that's really what I need. And then of course there's always price. I mean, career coaches charge different amounts of money.
That's true.
And that for a job seeker, depending on your financial situation, that can have an impact on it as well. As in terms of my work with career coaching, as Shira said, it's pretty much the whole job search. From where have you been, what have you done, assessing your skills, to the resume, the LinkedIn, your communications, covers letters, resumes. How are you going to, what's your message to the marketplace? all the way up to, finally getting an interview, prepping for interviews, negotiating the offer, first 90 days on the job, things to think about. So it's trying to give the job seeker everything they need to conduct a successful job search.
Right.
And as you all know, as job seekers, it's really a challenging project to manage. And there's no guarantee. I mean, I wish if I could guarantee people jobs, wave the magic wand, I'd be a billionaire, right?
Yeah.
But nobody can guarantee anybody a job anywhere. So it's that employer who's very risk adverse, trying to pick the best possible person for the job. Once you get to the interview, which is the hardest part of the whole job search, you've got to get to the interview before you're going to get hired.
That's right. So Ty, it's important, like Laverne is sharing, know what you're looking for from a coach before you call, right? So I know when people come to me, for example, they're looking for a copy. I do other things too, right? But they're often looking for a copy to write my resume, write my LinkedIn profile. That happens to be something I do. Not every coach does that. And if that's not something you need, then that's something to know, right? When you're calling somebody like Vern or me or anybody else, know what parts of the job search do you feel you're competent in handling yourself? What parts do you need support with? Maybe you just need support with interview prep. Maybe you need support with networking, maybe whatever. So when you're calling folks like us, make sure that you kind of get the support that you need. And then you can vet the different coaches based upon their skill set and their approach. And, like Vern and I probably have very different styles. We have different backgrounds, we have different skill sets, we have different lenses on it. So you see what I mean? But you want to kind of know what you're listening for, right? When you're vetting this.
Right. Vern brought up an important point, payment, and it's probably all over the board. Is it usually an hourly rate, or do they require like an upfront fee, or how does that work?
Everybody's different. Everybody's different. I happen to do hourly. Vern, do you do hourly as well?
I do hourly. And so the other way that you'll see it, Ty, is a package. In other words, $3,000 for 8 sessions of career coaching.
Or something like that.
Yeah, I happen to have a pretty strong bias against pricing like that, because sometimes when I work with clients, if it's 3 or 4 sessions and they're able to conduct their job search effectively without my help, there's no more need for them to pay me anymore, or I'd feel like I'm stealing from them. If I charge them $3,000 and after 3 or 4 sessions, they don't really need me, that's not fair. So it's kind of, I'll work with a client as long as they need me. And for a lot of clients, after, maybe 4 or 5 sessions, they're fairly independent. Now I still will be coaching them and they might call me, but it's not like every week we've got to have a discussion, because they know what they need to do. The resume's done. They're out there actively networking. They're actually finding jobs. They're getting to the interviews. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Is that helpful?
Yes.
You said know what you're looking for from a career coach. What if you need help with networking? What if you got the resume down, and what if it's the networking part?
It's fine.
What do you look for?
Yeah, Eric, when we say that find out what you're looking for, if all you need is networking support, vet a coach who can help you with networking support. Does that make sense? So whatever you need on your job search, just write it down. And when you call that coach, say, this is specifically what I need. I need networking support, or I need resume support, or I need all of it, or whatever. So yeah, most coaches can help you with most of what you're looking for, but certain people specialize in certain things. Like, for example, not every coach is a resume writer. Not every coach is going to do do accountability work with you. I mean, so it just depends on what you want. Just make sure that you know it and that you ask the question.
Just one other thing on the going back to the recruiters, Ty. As Shira say, there's retained search versus contingent, and she made some key points. With a retained search, you're going to get much more personalized, personalized attention from a retained search, because again, as Shira said, they're getting paid. It's an exclusive search. Their reputation is on the line, in the sense that if Shira's doing a search, her reputation is, I've got to present 3 to 5 really good quality candidates to this company. And if I do that, and if they hire them, and that turns out to be a great employee, well, then I'm going to hire Shira again, right? So for a retained search, they're really focused on the client and have a vested interest as you and as an individual. With contingent searches, they don't really have a vested interest in you as an individual. They're all competing with everybody else, and they don't get paid unless you get hired.
That's
and
right.
So it's like a lottery with them.
Exactly.
There's 10 contingent recruiters out there all sending resumes to the company,
right.
and one of them is going to win.
That's right.
And
That's right.
so,
So you could feel a little bit kind of tossed around, but there's nothing you can do about that. It just is the business model. I mean, it is what it is. If you're the candidate and you're interested in that job, you just have to go with it. You may not hear back from the recruiter right away. You may not get as much information as you need. It is what it is. It's like, I wish it were different. But it's not, it's just something you've got to work with, Okay, so other
I
questions?
guess to follow up on that, and I've not yet applied for jobs, but frequently you'll see a job and it will indicate the name of the recruiter. Is it best to apply for the job and then reach out to the recruiter? I just applied for this job. I'm eager to have whatever, or what?
Yeah. So when you're applying, so if you do, well, back up. I'm going to back way up.
That's fun time.
Yeah. So applying to a job through a job board should only be 10% of your job search. Do not rely on the job boards, Susan. Nobody shouldn't. Because when you're applying through a job board, you are competing with hundreds of other people, potentially. I mean, at least dozens, but could be hundreds. And so that's just never a really smart thing. I mean, you can apply, but if you apply, no, you don't need to reach out to the recruiter directly to say I applied. However, you do want to try to get an internal champion. An internal champion is somebody who knows that recruiter or knows preferably the hiring manager who can flag your resume. Okay. That's very important. So it's not about alerting the recruiter, hey, my resume is in your inbox or in LinkedIn or whatever. It's more putting the organization's name into LinkedIn, finding out if you putting the organization's name in, seeing if you can figure out who the hiring manager is, HR person, the recruiter, any of those people, hiring manager, HR, recruiter, seeing if they're second level and if they're a second level connection to you. And if they are, that means you have at least one mutual contact. Reach out to the mutual contact and say, hey, I recently applied to position ABC. I noticed you're to hiring manager, John Smith. Would you consider forwarding my resume and my resume cover letter to John for extra consideration? That's the way to get noticed. And that works really, really well. Recruiters and HR people are very hip to that. When they get a referral from somebody, especially if it's a recommendation. I mean, if your first level contact doesn't know you very well, they can just refer you in. But if they know you, they can recommend you. And that goes a long way. Vern, anything you want to share with them?
Yeah, think of it this way, Susan, as, when you apply for a job board or apply, to any opening, you're one of many. You're basically an unknown quantity, right? You're just one of 300 resumes I have on my desk now that I'm looking at. When, as Shira says, the internal champion comes forward to me, if I was the director of staffing or something, and they say, by the way, I have a good friend. I worked with her at a previous organization, tells them your name, tells them a little bit about you, tells them something about your skills, says, and advocates for you basically, and says, I think she'd be a great fit for this job. You really ought to make sure that you take a serious look at her resume. Well, as Shira said, that gets your resume pulled out of the pile. They're looking at your resume now, which again, you got to get to the interview. You're not going to get to the interview unless they've looked at your resume, right? So that's where, and that's networking. Having an advocate, having someone who can vouch for you, someone who can connect you to the right person.
It's important.
That's why your network is so important in the job search. As Shira said, only 10% of jobs actually get filled through those job boards. All of the research, all of the surveys show 70 to 80% of the jobs are found through some type of
Networking.
contact with another human being.
Yes,
who-
that's right.
And you might not even, I mean, the first job that I applied for, somebody said you should talk to so-and-so. I didn't know this person. It was a cold call. And at the end of the call, she said, oh, by the way, I just talked to an executive recruiter last, week, and she was looking for XYZ. And, would you be interested? I said, yeah, I think I would. And she, I didn't know this person, but she gave me the information for the executive recruiter. That's how I found the job. So if I didn't pick up the phone and call this person, I would have never got hired for that job. So.
Is that helpful, Susan? Okay, good. All right, Eric?
Um, a question about if you are able to find out who the recruiter is, and it's a headhunter, a third party, how can you tell the difference between a contingent and
You can't.
retained?
You'd never know. You'd never know. I mean, you could ask them, but it's not really couth to ask. I mean, other than maybe how they're relating to you, if they're kind of, I don't know, not slipshod, that's not the right word, but if you're feeling that they're being very transactional with you, maybe, not giving you a lot of information, it might be that they're contingent. I mean, you can't really know, but it really doesn't matter, whether they're contingent or retained, because at the end of the day, a recruiter's a recruiter. They've got a job opening, you're applying, you need to go through their process. If their process is thorough, fine. If it's not thorough, fine. It's like it's not going to really make a difference to you. I was just sharing the contingent and retained to manage your expectations. If there is a recruiter who's not giving you as much information or is not being as relational with you, and if you don't feel they're as invested in the search, it might be because they're contingent, but it's immaterial. Like it is what it is.
I guess I would, I don't think there's anything wrong with if a recruiter contacts you, asking them, are you a retained search or are you a contingent search?
Mhm.
I mean, you can ask them that, and I would think they would tell you. But as Shira said, it's still a job, whether
Right.
it's contained or
Doesn't matter.
So then it's up to you. Okay, I understand this is a contingent recruiter. I understand some of the issues with the contingent recruiter, but this is a job that really looks appealing to me. I think I'm really well qualified. So, obviously you have nothing to lose by working with the recruiter, other than like being prepared for the frustration of them never calling you back. So,
Exactly. That's it. You're just mentally preparing yourself.
yeah, that's why I say it's such a challenging project, because, you would think just professionally, courtesy, they call you back, but they're dealing with, maybe 30 or 40 jobs all at the same time. And
Right. And tons of candidates and
tons of candidates and,
they're going Mach 5, right? They cannot
Yeah.
spend the time, touching base with all these people, all the candidates, because they're trying to make a placement. They're trying to eat,
Right.
literally, guys, you have to understand, a contingent recruiter is literally working for free until they
Yeah.
make the placement.
Yeah.
Free. Okay. So they have got to hustle, as we say, in order to get that placement done.
Yeah.
So, Cicely.
Maybe this is a very dumb question, because
There's no dumb questions.
Nope.
yeah, because I reached out to a recruiter, because this, it was my first time. I find I have difficulty. I don't know what to say, how to get their attention, how to sell myself to the recruiter. I just feel like I feel very awkward. Don't know, besides, do I need to tell them, give them my resume or anything? I have no idea how to, communicate, because I'm from academia. So I just come from, I don't know how to work with recruiter, and I don't know how to reach out to them in a more professional way, I would say. So can you give me some tips or things that's best way how to approach a recruiter?
Okay, so it's not really about approaching the recruiter. It's about looking for the right opportunities. It might be that a recruiter is the one who's representing the opportunity, but you don't want to worry yourself about the recruiter, okay? You want to really be focused on what's the right sector, what's the right opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Who can I network with to find those opportunities? Networking is key, as we've been saying this morning. 80% of jobs, right, are found through networking. Now, it might be that in the course of networking, the opportunity that you find is represented by a recruiter. It's possible. In which case, you simply apply to the job, or maybe you're referred into the job. You treat them like you would anybody, any employer who's going to be vetting you, because it doesn't matter if it's a recruiter, a corporate recruiter, a third-party recruiter, an HR person, a hiring manager, the CEO. Somebody is the first line of defense. Somebody is doing the first line of screening. So don't worry yourself about, is it a recruiter? Is it not a recruiter? That's irrelevant. It's go after the opportunity. And whoever is the first point of contact, that's the person that you're selling yourself to. Now, that's more of an interview question. What is your elevator pitch? How are you presenting how are you aligning your background and skills with the opportunity that they're looking for, right? Because they have very specific skills they want to see, specific industry background. They have specific goals that they're trying to achieve. Can you align yourself? That's a different question. That's more about you knowing what you have to offer and you being able to customize what you offer to meet their needs. Okay, so that's my general statement about that. Now, that said, if you're looking to expand your network on LinkedIn with recruiters, if you're going after a certain sector, I should have mentioned this earlier, third-party recruiters, and actually this is pretty important, third-party recruiters usually have specialties. It's very rare to find a recruiter who does everything, okay? So people will either have an industry vertical or a career vertical. So somebody like me, my industry vertical are associations. So 98% of the time, I work with associations. I do associates, so I like to say the National Association of Widget Makers, if there was one, right? They could be a client, and I could place basically anybody in that organization. But I don't position myself as somebody who's going to recruit for government contractors. I mean, I think I did one search once, but that was just because I had a colleague who wanted me, and I'm like, okay, fine, I can do it. But I don't position myself in government contracting or in commercial real estate or healthcare or financial services, right? Those are not my sectors. My sector is associations. So some recruiters have an industry. Some recruiters have a career vertical. So an IT recruiter, they'll do all kinds of companies, but they do IT placement, or they place people in finance and accounting, all kinds of sectors, or they place human resources professionals, that kind of thing, or marketers, right? There's some firms that they only do the one thing, or maybe they have multiple practice areas. I know of a firm that does, I think they do HR, IT, finance, I guess, whatever. Does that make sense? So you want to be thinking when you're looking on LinkedIn, if you know the sector you're going after, or you know the profession you're going after, you could put the word recruiter and then put that sector or put that profession. So like if I put recruiter PMP, well, I might find a recruiter who works with who places project managers. Now, you have to know, Cicely, there's not a recruiter for everything, because there's some sectors that frankly just can't even afford to use a recruiter. Some professions that, like I would not imagine that there are recruiters for social workers. Social workers don't get paid a lot of money. Agencies who hire social workers are probably not going to be able to afford a recruiter. Does that make sense? So it's not across the board. There are certain recruiters, most recruiters there's certain industries and certain industries and professions, but not all. And Vern, is there anything you want to add to that?
Well, Cicely, you said you're in academia?
Yes, I just want to switch to workforce development or talent development.
Okay. Well, when you said academia, I didn't hear you say you wanted to switch. So academia, I was going to say, then you'd want to search for, as what Shira was saying, there are recruiters that specialize in higher education and those types of jobs.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. In fact, I even think there's a firm called Academic Search, if I'm not mistaken. But there are plenty of recruiters who specialize in academia. But something else I should also mention about recruiters, this is very, very important, is this. Remember how I mentioned earlier that employers are risk averse? Mm-hmm. Well, that's multiply that by a factor of 10 when it comes to recruiters. Here's why. Look, third-party recruiters. Third-party recruiters are usually hired by an employer to find the unicorn candidate. Now that means, Cicely, that typically speaking, when a third-party recruiter vets your resume, they want you to have been there and done that and have the t-shirt. It is a very, 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 very rare day when a recruiter is allowed to consider a career changer for their search. I need to put a period at the end of that sentence. You really got to get this, because the recruiter is being paid by the employer to find the niche candidate, the person who they can't find on their own.
Yeah.
And they are very, very, very nervous about presenting anybody that does not check every single box. That's their job, right? Now, the employer themselves might be more open if they weren't using a third-party recruiter and paying all that money, right? And they were just doing a behind-the-scenes search, the hidden network, as we call it, like they're not posting a job on a job board, they're not using recruiter, they're just whispering to their colleagues and saying, hey, does anybody know a good person? Then they might be much more open to a career, not 100% of the time, but maybe more open, because then they might have some flexibility. They're willing to consider different candidates. And, if somebody knows you and can refer you in, they might do an informational interview with you. You never know. But I would steer you away from, going after recruiters who do talent development search, because oftentimes they're going to want somebody who's done a lot of talent development.
I see. Okay, great. Oops, sorry. I didn't.
Yeah.
Did I? Am I? Oh, yeah.
You're fine.
Thought I was muted.
So are you
Yeah, that's
saying
very,
that
very helpful.
a first party recruiter is more likely to present you to a hiring manager than a third party?
First party, well, we don't use that term first party. We just say
Right.
third party. So a third party recruiter is somebody
So an
who
internal recruiter is more likely to present.
potentially, yeah, yes, more likely. Now, I'll say this: career changing is difficult anyway. Like it's just hard for everybody, because employers again are risk averse. So in general, they're challenged, right, when they look at a resume that's not what they think they're looking for. But yes, on balance, a corporate recruiter might be more open to it. I would really say it's the hiring manager that would be the most open, because they're the ones that have that job in their head. They're the ones who are thinking to themselves, who do I really need? So if the hiring manager meets somebody in their network and that person knows you, that person can say, John, I know you said you're looking for, project manager or whatever you're looking for. I'd like you to talk to Eric. He's an interesting guy and he's looking to make a career shift. And I think he's got some really interesting skills. Hey, hiring manager, would you go ahead and just meet him? That is where what we call the creative hires. That's where the creative hires happen. Usually by the time the job is formulated in the hiring manager's mind and it goes down to HR and the recruiter, it's structured. The hiring manager or the recruiter has very specific requirements. Okay, hiring manager, this is what you want. This is what I'm going to go get. But if the hiring manager is still formulating it in their mind and they meet somebody in their network, they might create, I've seen it happen, right? Vern, I'm sure you've seen it happen too, right? Where they get creative and like, I'll give you an example. I was career coaching somebody, I think it was earlier this year. And she's a woman who had a corporate background. I mean, corporate, up, down, worked for Unilever, worked for, just like corporate. And she really wanted to go switch into the nonprofit sector. And I'm like, this is going to be challenging. Well, through networking, somebody in a major nonprofit got wind of her and vetted her and basically crafted the role a little bit around her and hired her. Okay. But it was all behind the scenes. This was not a job board. This is not something she just applied to. She did it through networking. Okay. So that was how she made her career shift. And that's often how it'll happen. It's through some relationship building where the employer gets creative and they like you, or they heard about you, they heard you're a rock star, and then they see what they can do to mold. Vern, have you had experience with that?
Yeah, a number of times throughout my career. I can't think of a specific experience, but I know that at different times at different organizations that I've worked for, we've hired people, usually again through networking. Somebody says, you really ought to talk to so-and-so. They have a unique skill set. I think the way they've led and managed other projects would be something that would work within our organization. And so that does happen. It's fairly rare, but it can happen. And again, it comes through networking. It has somebody's really, advocating for you, and getting to probably the hiring manager, as Shira said, most cases, because even though everything is scripted, the hiring manager typically is the one who makes the ultimate decision when it comes down to it. Now they'll get input from anybody else that was in the interview process, but at the end of the day, the hiring manager is going to say, "Well, I'm going to choose this person for these reasons." So that's certainly an important part. And Cicely, going back to your originally question, you wanted to know how to communicate with recruiters. It really, going back to what Shira said, it's really how you communicate to anyone in your job search. And so it's about who you are, what your skills are, what your goals are. That's what you'd communicate to a recruiter if they reached out to you about a particular job. So let's suppose you wanted to stay in academia and you were talking to a recruiter who was in that. You talk to him about your background, the type of work you've done, the type of jobs you'd look for. Switching careers, as Shira said, is a difficult challenge. So that's another whole path that you have to follow in terms of being successful to do that. And sometimes you might have to take a step back. You might have to start at a lower level, maybe than you.
Presuming that they would even hire you for a lower level. That's the tricky part, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So,
and it's also about so career changing is possible. I've helped people do it. Vern, I'm sure you've helped people do it too. It is possible, but it takes a lot of intentionality. You have to really dig deep, and first of all, you have to understand exactly what that new profession requires of you, what employers are looking for, what specific skill sets they want to see. And then you've got to look through your background and you've got to pull out the golden threads and you've got to highlight it. The example I've given in the past. So years ago, I had a client and he was an attorney. And let's just say he wanted to become a recovering attorney. And he sat with me, didn't know what he wanted to do, but we figured out together he wanted to become a writer. Like, how do you turn an attorney into a writer? So I looked through his background and I found all the different writing skills. I mean, attorneys write, right? But we've packaged his resume so that it showcased his writing skills. Number one. Number two, redid his LinkedIn section, that summary about section, to focus on the fact that he wants to become a writer and the kind of writing he likes to do and his passion for it, blah, 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 blah. He ended up landing a job as a journalist with a trade publication, a journalist with a legal trade publication. So it was still in the legal field, but it was in journalism, right? So he was able to keep the community, the sector, and change his lane, change the profession.
Yeah, that's what I want to do because I'm a teacher. I've been teaching a lot. So it's related to training, to, basically developing, I would say, talent, build people's skills and doing particular things or good at something. So I'm translating all my teaching skills, or, also I'm a graphic designer. I'm, graphic design teacher. And so, because I want to change it to instructional design online teaching. So I want to translate all the skills, that I worked in the university and to the corporate world, because I feel more people, more, important, and then more people need to learn. So I think that, if I switch here, I probably be more useful and do more interesting things, besides just teaching graphic design. That's my motivation. So I'm struggling, but that's how in my mind, that my teaching skill can be translated or, fit into the corporate training or talent development sector.
Well, look, it might be helpful for you to work with someone like me or someone like a Vern or another coach to help you to figure out, how you want to transfer your skills, because it takes a lot of intention, and you need somebody sometimes who can be a little more objective. So just a thought for you.
Okay, thanks.
Cicely, one of the things that, if you're not aware of it, if you want to get into that type of field, the Association for Talent Development,
ATD.
APD, is a
Yes,
professional.
I just joined. I became a
Okay,
member
all right,
last
good,
week.
good, good.
Yeah, I was like
Good.
very excited about that place. It was, oh my gosh, I have so much to learn.
Okay, yeah, well, yeah, there's a lot there, I can tell you. I've been on the board.
So many
of
new
the-
things. I was like, oh my gosh.
There's
Yes,
so much
thank
there,
you.
yeah. And also,
I've been on-
make sure you join the local chapter as well.
Yes.
So you
Yeah,
can.
yeah. I joined the New York City chapter. AD.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
So as a career changer, that's a really positive first step. Just to be aware that there is a wealth of resources and information about the field that
Yes.
you would like to move to. So, and by being part of that and joining the chapter, you'll start to network with people. You'll start to maybe uncover an opportunity. You never know, but that's part of the learning curve that you'll be on, but that's the right track.
Yeah, because like Sherry mentioned that I should join a local chapter. Last Saturday, I just went check out the New York City chapter. I said, oh my gosh, they're so active, and I just said, okay, I want to become a member. So
Well, the other thing, Cicely, that I would recommend, if you have the time, all of the local chapters. I've been on the board of several local chapters throughout my career of ATD. They're always looking for volunteers to help them. And
Great.
now,
Yes.
as a volunteer,
Yes.
they start to not only know you as a person,
Right.
you're able to start to demonstrate your skills and competencies, your ability to communicate, your ability to ask good questions, your ability to problem solve. They start to see that. That's the one powerful thing about volunteering, which is a good thing to do during your job search, because it's also a networking opportunity.
It's huge.
right. That's
Especially at the local level, the local chapter level, they usually always need volunteers.
Yep.
Yeah, join a committee. The easiest thing in the world to do. You don't have to be on the board, but just join a committee.
Yeah.
You get to know people. Yeah. So speaking of all of associations, especially, like, I would recommend this for any job seeker, but especially for career changers. As we say in the association sector, there's an association for everything. I mean, everything. Everything, every industry, every profession, niche industries, niche professions, you name it, there's an association for. In fact, there's now actually, as of March or April, there's now I forget what they're called, something like the National Mask Manufacturers Association, right? Of course. Okay, there you go. That's what I mean. There's one for everything. So especially if you are a career changer, it's a great place to learn about the profession or the industry, to network with people, volunteer, just get involved, because then you're going to show up as part of the community. Even if you're switching into the community, people will start seeing you as if you're part of the community.
Right. That's great. That's great idea. I'm just great advice. I'm so excited, and I already signed up 3 events. I'm just like, I have to go to every one of them.
Go to as many as you can. Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure. Hey, Rick, glad you could join us. Rick is our government contracting expert. Good to see you.
Hi.
Hey, Rick. You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Sorry, I'm late, but I just wanted to get in to hear the last piece of it and also join the prayer meeting at the end.
Always happy to have you. All right. Any other questions?
The way you made it sound, you made it sound like corporate recruiters have cushy jobs. What challenges do they face?
Oh, they're not cushy.
That's a good question.
Oh, they are so not cushy. I would never want a corporate recruiter job. Oh, bless their hearts. Eric, this is the most not cushy job like ever. These poor recruiters, let me preach about this. And Vern, you can double back. These recruiters, they don't get in general, they don't get the respect that they deserve. Okay. they have a lot of demanding hiring managers that are just pouring, I mean, just beating them down, saying, I need you to find this purple squirrel. I need you to find this unicorn candidate. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with you to tell you what I want, but I want you to find this person. And the hiring managers are really, really usually very demanding. And these recruiters have all these different openings. They've got to juggle the hiring managers. They got to juggle their applicant tracking system, which is this massive database that's clunky usually. They've got all these different candidates. They've got pressure upon pressure. Rick, I mean, you're head of it.
Yeah.
I feel for you guys, like, and then if it's in the government contracting world, you've got all kinds of other issues with needing to find secret clearance and contracts that you guys haven't won yet. I mean, Eric, it is not cushy. It's hard. It's really,
and
really
the reason, and one of the reasons, Cher's right about, project managers being very demanding. And they also, because there's a lot of competition in bidding the projects, most of the time we get positions that are under market rates. They give us these rates that are ridiculous with all kinds of different caveats, which make it, so there's 3 of them in DC. And, and then you're dealing with human beings, so they're very fickle, and you think you have someone that's loyal to you and they get, $10 an hour more somewhere else and they're gone. So it's very, I wish it was cushy. I'd be wearing my hula skirt right now and a lei or something, but it's very frustrating. A lot of times.
And that, I would say government contracting recruiting, where Rick is probably the most frustrating. Other kinds of corporate recruiters who are not government contractors, like a normal company, it's still frustrating, for the reasons that I mentioned about hiring managers. But yeah, it's their challenge, which also means, which I say that actually to build some sympathy for them, because when they are reaching out to you, they are still very challenged and they've got tons of priorities. In fact, they've got more administrative responsibilities than a third-party recruiter, because they have to track the whole life cycle of the candidate. They've got a lot of regulations they've got to jump through, that in the applicant tracking system. They have lots of paperwork, lots of database work, and so they can't necessarily respond to you in the timeliness that maybe you would want, because they've got a lot of, if you will, HR responsibilities that a third-party recruiter just doesn't have. So they're pressure.
So we're a small company, and so right now, business development's asking me to do research on company and finding key people at different companies, so they can kind of talk to them to find out what the landscape is on the competition. So I'm not even doing recruiting right now. I'm jumping. They said, hey, we're short business development. We need you to go in here and do research for us. So there's a lot of things, especially in a smaller company. I don't know about the bigger companies, but
so what are the pain points you could help a corporate recruiter with that'll help them notice you?
Well, the easiest thing you could do is really pay attention to what they're asking for in the position and tailoring your resume to that PD, because that makes it so easy for me. A lot of people put generic resumes out there, and then we have to try to figure out, well, I wonder what he means by this. But if you go in and look at a PD and you say, here's key skills.
By the way, PD is a position description.
Position description. And if you look at it and say, oh, well, I did this at this company, let me put this verbiage in. If I see the same verbiage as the skill requirements, I'll definitely give you a call. That piques my interest.
And look very specifically when you go down the position requirements, especially the first few bullets of the requirement section. Use this, if appropriate, use the same language that they did. The example I always give, which is a very simple one, is if they need event planning and you put on your resume meeting planning, you should say event planning. I mean, right? It's that kind of thing. There could be some synonyms that are simple tweaks, but you've got to look and see exactly what language did they use. And if you've got that skill, put that language in your resume, especially in the top. If you've got a skills section, make sure that it goes there.
I mean, it's more work, but it pays off more in actually getting meetings.
Yeah, and just another quick example, given the fact that throughout my career, I had a number of senior HR roles. So I had recruiting, corporate recruiting reporting to me or working with a corporate recruiter. And as Shira said, hiring managers are demanding, we need this person, we need them as quickly as we possibly can. And so then you go through the whole recruiting process. And guess what? The hiring manager has other responsibilities besides hiring this person. So you go through the whole thing of setting, reaching out and trying to schedule an interview. And the hiring manager says, well, I can't do this and I can't do that. My boss wants me here and I got to travel here. And so then the whole process just gets drawn out. And so you as the candidate are going, oh my God, this is taking forever.
Yeah.
Because there's other things going
That's
on in the
right.
corporation
That's
besides
right.
hiring that
That's
that person.
And in fact, if I could jump in here, Vern, for the hiring manager, even though they might have an urgent need, the actual process of hiring is usually at the bottom of their list
Of their list,
of
yes.
priorities.
Which-
They've
which-
delegated it off, and so they've relegated it off to the recruiter, to the HR person, and so that HR person, the recruiter is like banging down their door. Wait, call. I need to schedule this candidate. I need an update. I need to know when we're going to make an offer. Blah blah blah. And the hiring is like, yeah, I'll get to it. And they've got all these other priorities, and then they don't circle back. And so day after day after day goes by, and the recruiters told you, oh, you'll probably hear from us in a week. No, it's usually at least 4 times longer than you think that you think it'll happen. And it can be longer than that. So you've got to, I always say, pack your patience.
And it's not the recruiter's fault.
No,
fact,
there's other
one
priorities.
One of the things that would drive me absolutely nuts is the hiring manager says, I need this person. I send them, here are the 5 top
Right,
resumes. Look
right.
at these, tell us which ones you want to schedule.
Crickets.
A day goes by, 2 days goes by, 3 days go. I'm saying these are the 5 best potential
That's right.
candidates. And if we don't get them in here to interview,
We're
they're
lose
going to
them.
get hired by somebody else.
Right.
Because
That's
they're
right.
that good. And
That's right.
so
It's not their priority. Even though they
Yeah.
say that it is, they've got other
So-
competing interests.
yeah, it can be incredibly frustrating and time consuming and it almost feels like you're wasting time sometimes, which is that really frustrates me when I waste time.
Yeah.
So,
That brings me up to another point. How should you go about shifting focus if you made it past the recruiter, shifting focus to the hiring manager, and how to shift what you say in interviewing and whatnot?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, when you're saying when you meet with the
I guess, yeah, because the recruiter screens you first, right? But how do you, the hiring manager is someone you might potentially work with, right?
right.
Yeah.
So the hiring manager is going to be looking for fit. They want to know if you really, first of all, you want to think strategically. You want to think about asking questions around what are the strategic goals of this department? What's keeping that hiring manager up at night? What are the success measures for that role? What are the ideal qualifications, the ideal attributes that they're looking for? Who are the stakeholders that you're going to be engaged with? There are all these different kinds of questions you can ask to show that hiring manager that you want to be the right fit for their department, because that hiring manager reports to somebody, right? Everybody reports to somebody. They've got their own goals. Your job is to help them achieve their goals. That's why they're hiring you. Okay. So to the extent that in the hiring manager interview, you can speak to those urgent problems that person is going to need you to solve, that's what you need to do. The recruiter is basically there to say, can you, have you. They check a bunch of boxes. That's kind of their job. But the hiring manager is going to be working with you. They need to know that you can fulfill their business goals. So Vern or Rick, do you want to share anything else?
well, what Shira said, you ask all those questions. Once you get the answers to those questions, then you've got to be prepared to communicate to the hiring manager some example, some story, some way that you are communicating to them that I have these skills and here's an example of how I've used them. Here's the results or the outcomes that I've achieved. And you try to choose those example stories that match up as closely as possible, or ideally as exactly as to what they're looking for. And so that's the way to convince, a hiring manager that you are the right fit. You've got the right skills, the right experience for this particular role. That's probably the primary that's the primary decision point for most hiring managers. Who fits, as Shira said, who fits this role and who fits it best, and that's the person I'm going to hire.
So the formula that Vern is talking about, there's different acronyms for it, but there's a real easy one that I like. It's called SAR, Situation, Action, Result. So it's a way of telling the story. Some people call it STAR, Situation, Task, Action, Result. It's all the same stuff. It's basically telling a story. You give the backstory of what the problem was that you solved, of why you needed to solve a problem, the actions that you took, and the results. But you only want to pick stories, to Vern's point, you only want to pick stories that relate to the specific job, that relate to the challenges that this employer is facing. So to the extent that you can figure that out, you can tailor your stories to that role. It's very important. So it's not just like what Rick was saying, tailoring your resume, but also what Vern is saying and tailoring your stories.
Yeah, the hiring manager will be more of a behavioral interview, or at least ours are. And they're going to say, tell me about a time when XYZ.
Yep.
And that's where you want to have that STAR story, type answer.
Exactly.
And that's, I can't emphasize enough to spend the time and the hard work necessary to sit down and actually create your stories on a Word document, as many stories as you can think about throughout your career, and not only write them, but then practice them, and feel very comfortable that if somebody asks you, you're going to be able to communicate it effectively, efficiently, coherently, without rambling all over the place. Because even if you've got a great story and you ramble all over the place, that's going to not help you in the interview.
Cool. I'm looking at the time, and we need to wrap up here, but I haven't done this in a while. I wanted to put in the chat box the place where you can find the recording of all of our Hire Moment Masterminds, going all the way back to when we started last August. Every single week is up there, with the exception of one, I think. And so, feel free to avail yourself of this. I should have this recording up in the next couple days or so. So with that, we're gonna sign off here. And for those of you who would like to stay on the call for a prayer call, I will be leading that shortly. But for the rest of you, look forward to seeing you next week, and I wish everybody a blessed day.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Take care.
Bye.